Hello there! Obi-Wan Kenobi, Episode 5, Part 5, Chapter 5, Johnny 5, whatever you want to throw onto this. This might actually be my favorite episode of the season so far. Now, this isn't to say that all the other episodes weren't up to snuff, and it's not really to say that this episode is perfect by any means, but it is an episode that I really liked more than most other episodes of the show so far. I do have some issues with it, but we'll get to it in just a bit. First of all, again, reinforcing what I keep saying every single episode review of this show, pretty much every single episode of this show shows us a completely different planet. Episode 1, mostly on Tatooine, and a little bit of Alderaan. Episode 2, mostly on Dayu. Episode 3, Mapuzo. Episode 4, Nern. And now Episode 5, pretty much most of it takes place on Jabin, which, it's a planet that was introduced in Episode 4, but now we actually get to spend more time on it. And someone that's actually really pointed out to me, I think it might have been either Star Wars Explained or Screen Crush. I can't remember which one. But I highly recommend checking those guys out. But some of them actually pointed out to me that each episode of Obi-Wan, in a way, slightly mirrors each episode of the original Star Wars 6 movies. And episode 1 mainly mirrors some points from Phantom Menace. Episode 2 mainly references Attack of the Clones. Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. 4, New Hope. And this episode, in a lot of ways, actually does mirror a lot of points from Empire Strikes Back. We see the dark side, especially Vader landing on a planet where people are trying to escape them. We see Vader running a tunnel. There's some Master and Padawan training taking place. Vader fails to prevent people escaping from him in a ship. Yes, there's lots of mirrors to the original 6 Star Wars movies in this Obi-Wan show, and I guess that explains why each episode now doesn't have a title. It's just Chapter 1, Part 1, or rather Part 2, Part 3, and so on and so forth. Here's some of the stuff I did like about this episode. I love seeing Hayden Christensen back in full form. Now, obviously, we have seen Hayden Christensen as Vader in this show, but he was mainly in the suit or in a bacta tank. We didn't get to see the Hayden Christensen we've come to know. And this episode gave it to us. Of course, was pretty hot. Some of you may know that a couple of days ago, I did a full rewatch of all the Star Wars movies, including the prequels. The Hayden Christensen from Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith is still very fresh in my mind. So to see an older Hayden Christensen trying to play the younger Anakin Skywalker from 2002 was a bit jarring at times, but you know what? I got over it. It was really just, it's the same actor playing the same character that he did 20 years ago. Put that into your head. It was 20 years ago. 2002, 2022. So, yeah. Obi-Wan also looked slightly different, but again, I got over it pretty quick. Now, for some of you who might be wondering, like I was originally, if it was actually taking place before the Clone Wars began, namely before Attack of the Clones, or rather after Attack of the Clones, keep in mind, Anakin, it does have his human hand still. So this definitely takes place before the events of Attack of the Clones. So yeah, that mystery solved. I loved that they were not only showing us Anakin and Obi-Wan in their prime, mostly, but that they actually had their duel intercut with moments from the show to enforce some of the stuff that was happening. And so it kind of reminded me of some of the flashbacks done in Arrow and Once Upon a Time, where they keep cutting back to the flashback era whenever it's relevant to whatever is happening in the current state of affairs. So I really liked that. I liked Leia in this episode. Something that I don't think a lot of people are talking about is that what they were having a conversation about someone needs to go and fix whatever Lola broke in the wiring and stuff, and they mentioned I'm not small enough to crawl through those vents, and the camera immediately focuses on Leia, and she doesn't go like, yeah, I could do it, yeah, I'll do it. All she says is, I'm going to need a ladder. So it's like she knows she's the only one who can pull that off, and she doesn't even argue. She doesn't even suggest that she would be the one to do it. She's just, yeah, I'm doing it. Give me a ladder, and then they just go straight to T'Challa from Infinity War. Get this woman a ladder. So yeah, I love the characterization of Leia in this show. Vivian Lyra Blair. I had a problem remembering her name a couple of episodes ago. Vivian Lyra Blair perfectly encapsulates the spirit of young Leia and who Leia is going to grow up to be. And I just love it. I also love seeing Obi-Wan really starting to trust her more. It's not like, no, it's too dangerous. No, you're not going to go. No. He reinforces what she says, and he's like, no arguments. She's going in there. Give this woman a ladder, and he also starts to trust Haja a little bit more, and Tala, especially after what happened last episode. And I loved the backstory of Tala, which also serves to as an emotional gut punch when she eventually sacrifices herself later in the episode. I love the characterization of Tala in this episode. Finally, we get the backstory of Riva, the third sister. Something I'm pretty sure most of us have already guessed at this point, that she was one of the younglings that escaped Order 66. One of the younglings we actually get to see in the opening scene of the show. Again, most people have already figured that out yet on their own, but it was nice to get a confirmation from the showrunners of that. And something I liked better on repeat viewing is that she was never really a Sith Inquisitor. She was, this entire time, she was just trying to pretend to be a Sith Inquisitor to get closer to Vader, which she does manage to do in this episode when he anoints her as the Grand Inquisitor. But then again, of course, by the end, we learn that it was all just a manipulation by Vader to get her to show her true colors, which led into that amazing duel between her and Vader at the end, where they reveal that, yep, the Grand Inquisitor is alive, just like we've all pretty much suspected from the beginning. Which kind of irks me in this episode, is that stabbing someone through the gut doesn't really have that much of effect anymore. I mean, we all remember that tragic moment when Darth Maul stabbed Qui-Gon right in the chest and Qui-Gon died. Obviously, there's a difference between stabbing someone in the gut than stabbing someone in the chest, closer to where the heart is, at least for humans, that is. But again, it's stabbing people with a lightsaber doesn't seem to have that same effect. I mean, obviously, the Grand Inquisitor is still alive, and now Riva's still alive, and presumably still going to be alive in the final episode. I guess it's just a Grand Inquisitor thing. Who knows? But another thing that really irks me in this episode, and it's really starting to become a problem for me, it never bothered me up until this point. I always knew it was a thing, but it never really bothered me as much as it does other people. But the stormtroopers, I always knew stormtroopers had terrible aiming, and it was always in service of the plot. They only hit someone when it was necessary for them to hit someone in the plot, if you catch my meaning. Now, obviously, if you play Star Wars video games, their aiming's improved tenfold, but again, in service of the plot of the game you're playing. They're supposed to be antagonists. It wouldn't be much of a game, much of an enjoyable game, if the soldiers that are shooting at you miss every single time. So it was always, whenever the stormtroopers were able to hit someone accurately, it was always in service of the plot. And I know that sequel movies do tend to get a bit of a bad rap, and that's just putting it mildly, but in the opening moments of The Force Awakens, when the stormtroopers start shooting the villagers, they actually do manage to shoot them, and again, in service of the plot. So in this episode, when the doors open and the stormtroopers start shooting all the the escaping refugees, they barely managed to hit any of them. And it really did start to bother me because at this point, it is in service of the plot. It would make sense for the stormtroopers to kill some of these people off. And we only do see one stormtrooper get to kill someone, and he was literally standing 2 feet away from him and shooting him in the chest. And in other situations, you see stormtroopers, again, standing 3 or 4 feet away from people, and they still miss them. So, yeah, the stormtroopers aiming has never really been that much of a problem for me. It did bother me in this episode. But again, that's minor stuff. And another thing that, more of a major stuff, that bothered me in this episode is Obi-Wan basically manipulates Reva, telling her that he can help her, and then he just leaves her to die. It doesn't really feel like an Obi-Wan thing to do. Maybe this Obi-Wan in this particular stage of his life would do that, but it still doesn't feel like the Obi-Wan from A New Hope. And that's really a major thing that bothered me. I love the fake out, and I love that even the audience isn't even aware of it until it happens. Because if you rewatch that scene, you can clearly see that second transport ship is there, but all you're really focusing on is the ship that's trying to escape and that Vader pulls apart with the Force. You don't even see the second transport ship until it takes off. Of course, you could just ask yourself, well, once the second transport took off, why didn't you just stop with the Force there? But, you know, what, again, in service of the plot, which it's how I see a lot of Star Wars recently. But regardless, really solid episode, might be the best of the bunch. I love the flashback scenes. I love Obi-Wan and Anakin's duel, and I love that at some points during their duel, they're mirroring some of their moves from Revenge of the Sith. And I love that at another point during the duel, Anakin basically does the exact same movements that Luke did when he battled Vader in Return of the Jedi. So there's a lot of mirroring in Star Wars, and it's very much on display here. And I love the line that he gives them, that his need to prove himself is his ultimate undoing, and until he learns to master that, a Padawan he will still be. Can't remember the exact quote, but it really does reinforce Vader telling him in A New Hope that when he left him, he was but the learner, still but the learner, and now he's the master. I love it. I love the all these stuffs. Again, you know, the stuff I mentioned earlier that I didn't like, it will continue to stay there, and maybe it will bother me less once I start to watch the episode multiple times. But that's just my initial thoughts on Obi-Wan episode 5. We only got one more episode to go, I believe. And again, I'm curious. I don't want to pass judgment on what I think is going to happen in the last episode just yet, because we see Reva still struggling after getting stabbed in the gut, learning about Bail Organa's message, and we see a shot of Luke. Finally, Luke makes an appearance in the show all of a sudden, but I'm curious as to what she's going to do with that information. Obviously, she doesn't hear the full message. She doesn't necessarily know all of Luke's importance just yet, but who knows? So again, I'm going to reserve judgment until I see the final episode. So yeah, one more episode to go, and this show is really doing it for me, and this episode especially, this is, again, my favorite episode of the show so far, and we'll see if that remains after the final episode. So let me know what you all thought of this episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Let me know what you're expecting to see in the final episode, and I'll see you then. So until then, may the Force be with you. Always. Hi there. Thank you for watching the video. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and tell your friends. I'll see you next time.